Welcome to episode 5 of Docs Talk Teaching. Today we're going to talk to you about assessment. Now, I want you to imagine that you're sitting at the table and you're at the IEP meeting, and around you is the special education teacher, the gen ed teacher, the special education administrator, the parent, maybe the student, and any other related service providers. And you're at the section of the IEP where you're trying to determine what state assessment is going to be the appropriate assessment for this child. Now, that may seem like a simple check in the box, but let me assure you, that's no simple decision. When you choose the assessment, you are choosing the curriculum that will focus toward that assessment for the entire year. That's what we want you to understand today. Pam?
That's right, Peggy. We are going to go step by step and help you discern whether the child should participate in grade level standards, or is there anything alternative that you can choose from? So let's get started. So on the IEP, you have 2 questions that you have to check. The first question is, are state assessments required for the grade level? So not all grade levels have to take this assessment. The assessments start in 3rd grade and beyond. And you also have to look at which subjects are assessed. Now, the second question is, will the student require accommodations or an alternative curriculum? So if the student is receiving accommodations to access the general education curriculum, those same accommodations can be applied for the assessment. Peggy, do you want to talk about the alternative curriculum and that option?
Sure, Pam. Now, choosing an alternative assessment means choosing an alternative curriculum. And when that alternative curriculum is chosen, that means that you're actually choosing to not be diploma track, but to be on a high school certificate of completion. So we want to be careful, especially at those elementary grades, to not try to throw off that student's progress toward that high school diploma. We want to be really careful about the decision making when we are choosing that assessment. Now, with good reason, many states have caps on the number of students in the district that can take the alternative assessment. And the reason for that is, if you're sitting at that IEP and everyone at the table just says, you know what, they're going to have test anxiety, we're just going to choose that alternative assessment, and then maybe we'll jump back into the gen ed assessment next year. Well, that causes gaps. And we truly want all students to have access to the general education curriculum and hence the associated test, if that is a possibility. I want to tell you about a time when my mother-in-law in the 1960s and 70s was a special education teacher, and she would tell us stories about how she taught baking and knitting and coin identification, and how she had developed a functional curriculum for the whole day for her students with special needs. Then I come into a career in the 90s and the early 2000s, and I'm told, here's the textbook, teach from beginning to end. Now, at that time, we did have a state assessment, but the pressure just wasn't there for performance on that state assessment. In fact, I wasn't even having standards that I needed to meet. I was just following the textbook. Now, times really changed. Pam, do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure. I remember when the No Child Left Behind Act came into schools and feeling the pressure to test every student every single year. It took 3 weeks out of teaching and a lot of coordination of multiple personnel in the building. George W. Bush had signed the No Child Left Behind Act, and it required all states in the United States to test students annually for the first time. And Barbara Bush was an advocate for the standards. Her son, Neil Bush, had struggled through school. In fact, his counselor told him that she doubted he would even graduate. So Barbara took it upon herself to teach him. And later on, they had found that he had dyslexia. And his mom was very involved in teaching him. Eventually, Neil graduated, not just college, he also went on to get his MBA. So this law provided federal funds to help school districts better serve disadvantaged students and improve their performance, especially in reading and math. But evidence-based practices such as the science of reading was still not implemented in schools. So Peggy, tell us about the Next Education Act.
So in comes the Obama administration, and now we have the Every Student Succeeds Act, which replaced No Child Left Behind. Now, within Every Student Succeeds Act, it was the replacement, but the standards stayed in place. We just wanted to put together accountability systems to make sure that we had a measure of student achievement and that we were implementing evidence-based practices. Now, that meant that teachers needed to be trained on how to provide instruction when they're teaching through those standards. And we're still working on that. Like, we're making sure that we have quality instruction for students. But the best part of this whole thing is that the legislation got involved and it really raised the bar for what the expectations for learning were. Now, that's why choosing the assessment is so important, because when you do that, you are choosing the matching curriculum to that assessment. So please, when you're sitting at that IEP table, do not take that lightly. Well, that wraps up episode 5 of Docs Talk Teaching. We hope that you learned something new. We'll see you next time.